Hello and welcome to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neal Howard. Thank you so much for joining us here today on the program. Now, President Nixon signed the war on cancer into law back in 1971. Now, here we are nearly half a century and hundreds of billions of dollars later, and it looks like we're still fighting a losing battle. But maybe we're not fighting a losing battle. Our guest is Sylvie Beljanski. She's joining us to discuss her new book, Winning the War on Cancer, The Epic Journey Towards a Natural Cure. And she's also going to talk about why we don't necessarily have to lose this war. Welcome to the program, Sylvie.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for taking the time. Give our listeners a bit of background about yourself.
Well, I was born in New York, raised in Paris, and became a lawyer. And when I came back to work as a lawyer in a law firm in New York, just shortly after that, I learned that my father and my mother were arrested and in France by the French government as part of a secret operation. I was very surprised, trying to understand what happened, and what I discovered is that my father, being a molecular biologist, had uncovered some natural molecules that had helped former president, French President François Mitterrand, to deal with his advanced prostate cancer. And François Mitterrand, against all odds, was able to finish his second term. When Mitterrand finally passed away, there was a number of political, well-positioned people who had been very infuriated with the fact that my father had allowed François Mitterrand to continue to the end of his second term. They were ready to seize power, and that did not happen. So after Mitterrand finally passed away, they raided the laboratory and tried to destroy everything. But I had seen, I had grown up seeing what those products, those natural molecules could do to people. And I decided to create a foundation here in New York, the Beljanski Foundation, and continue with the research, get the research, my father's research validated. And I just wrote a book about it, which is Winning the War on Cancer.
Yes. Is this the first book that you've written?
I co-wrote another book in French with my mother a few years ago, which was more about more scientific, and this one is more about the story, explaining the science, of course, but telling the story from my own eyes, what happened for the past 20 years, and how everything was able to start all over again from New York, and speaking about the validation of the research.
In telling your story, it does sound like an actual war on cancer, but maybe on the other side of that conflict from your father and your point of view. However, the war on cancer, as it relates to what we're talking about today, all we hear about is more and more cancers, more resilient forms of cancer, more money needed for research and development of cancer treatments and possible cures. Are we winning this battle? Are we losing it? And how can we win it if we're losing it?
Well, as of today, according to the World Health Organization, about 1 out of 3 people is touched with a diagnosis of cancer in their lifetime, and this number worldwide is expected to double by 2030. So we cannot say that we are winning the war on cancer, unfortunately. However, we are not doomed. There are things that we can do. If we do not change what we are doing, of course, we are going to get always the same results. But there are things that we can do, and we should change. As of now, we have health systems which are completely broken, which are completely turned to sick people, and nothing is done to get a health system which would be based on prevention. And I make a big difference between prevention and diagnosis. Prevention is about preventing people to get sick. Diagnosis is about telling people that they are sick and that they should enter into a sick-centered health system. Then, there is also other things that should be done. I mean, especially with natural compounds. As of today, the little bit of research that we have is showing us that some natural compounds are really able to fight very effectively cancer, but there is not enough research being done with that, and not enough research because in order to patent a molecule, it has to be new. So only a new synthetic molecule can be patented and bring return on investment. So there is no incentive for companies to research natural compounds. And also, so they have no economic incentives. They cannot make claims on something natural. They don't have any exclusivity. So nothing has happened to really unlock the power of nature and to tap this what nature has given to us to protect ourselves. So we definitely could change all those things.
How can we harness this power of nature to fight cancer, and how can the government get involved in order to facilitate the process of discovering and shaping some of these new treatments that you say are needed?
Natural molecules can go a long way. We know that from research now done with Columbia University, Kansas University, Cancer Treatment Centers of America. The Beljanski Foundation, which is a non-for-profit based in the U.S., has invested research now showing that natural molecules are really able to make a difference. This research has to be supported and to be funded. And there is also a lobbying effort that has to be made in order to get a better acceptance of natural medicine. It's all about integrative medicine, actually, that accept that drugs are needed in some conditions, but also along that, natural compounds are able to go a long, long way, and sometimes in synergy with drugs.
When it comes to natural versus synthetic compounds, is the link between toxic body and toxic mind still apply? Can you explain that briefly? Emotions, are kind of cellular signals, and they do have an effect just like toxic compounds, toxic chemicals. They interfere with the proper regulation of our body. Every day we are facing chemicals, and we have to process them and eliminate them. If we are in an emotional toxic environment, we are not able to do that properly. And then it has been seen again and again that a big emotional event, a shock, can absolutely trigger cancer. There has been some research done showing that there can be a link between what organ is getting cancer and what kind of emotion as we have been unable to process properly, just like sometimes we are unable to process properly an assault of chemicals. I don't believe that emotion is... I do believe that emotions are part of the root of the problem. I don't think that treating the emotions is the solution is enough for all treating all cancer. But I think it should be absolutely looked into for a successful treatment. You just cannot ignore emotions. We are flesh and emotion, and we cannot just ignore half of what we are. You're right. Now, your book, Winning the War on Cancer, The Epic Journey Towards a Natural Cure, published by Morgan James. Where can our listeners get a copy of your book?
So on the website, winningthewaroncancer.com, the book is not out yet, but it can be pre-ordered, and it also can be pre-ordered on Amazon, Amazon.com, at the page of Winning the War on Cancer by Sylvie Beljanski.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sylvie Beljanski. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very, very much, Neal.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neal Howard. Transcripts and audio of the program are available at healthprofessionalradio.com.au and also at hpr.fm. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, listen in, and download at SoundCloud. And be sure and visit our affiliates page at healthprofessionalradio.com.au.